Good morning and welcome to the Monday Market Update. My name is Nash Paradise. Joined with me here is my good buddy down in sunny Florida, Andrew Cady. Andrew, how you doing this morning?
Amazing. Happy to be alive. It's Monday. Ready to kick some butt, take some names.
Love it. Monday, and an interesting Monday because while we had a bunch of nothing burgers with cheese last week, we've got a whole bunch of good stuff going on this week that we want to let you know all about, what's to be expected. Talk a little bit about something that just popped up on my feed while we were waiting for this to start. So I'm going to be able to hit Andrew with this, having no idea that it's coming, which makes for a really entertaining podcast. So looking forward to that. But let's jump right in, take a look at where interest rates went last week, what the volatility was, and kind of what we were dealing with there. You know, we're calling this a mid-volatile week. We did get some improvements, a little blip there in the middle. Anything you would add to, you know, what we saw last week as far as interest rates go?
I think we're trending, down again, which is good. Is it going to hold this week? That's the big question. I will say, on the mortgage-backed security front, we did break through some pretty good levels of support that are going to be critical to hold this week. We are through the 25-day and 50-day moving average, and it's all going to be data dependent on what we get this week.
Yeah, and breaking through that 420 mark on the 10-year yield has been so huge. It's been a very strong floor. I mean, just for a couple of weeks, but it was a strong ceiling before, and now it's a strong floor. So that's a mark that we're looking at. Right now we're over it, 421. So we've been in that hover zone. So yeah, we can go one way or another, and there really is no resistance on either side. We know we can go up a bit, and we know we've got some room to go down. So hopefully that makes this next week's volatility meter a little bit higher. But, when you start at 616 and get to 615, that doesn't really tell the story of some of the intraday movements that we had middle of last week, especially. Things were looking rough, but finished in a strong direction. So we'll take that win. Taking a look at what actually happened last week, here's the economic news. We had some big stuff that looked like it was going to hit last week. And then, you get that old-fashioned government shutdown. I felt like we've been dealing with a lot of those so far this year. So it did take a lot of the interest out of last week's data. A couple neat things happened, towards the latter part of the week. Andrew, what's your thoughts on last week's data?
I think the big piece of data last week was the JOLTS report. If you don't know what the JOLTS report is, it's JOLTS. It's job openings and labor turnover. November's report was 7.2 million job openings. There was an expectation for December at 7 million, and that mark was missed pretty substantially at 6.5 million job openings. So markets really tend to the markets liked that. We saw the 10-year treasury break beneath that 4.2 for a little bit. Nash and I were texting each other like virtual high fives. Mortgage-backed securities rallied, only to lose a little bit of the gains. But we're holding better than we were. And I think this week with the data, it's either going to push it the opposite direction, or we're actually going to maybe see the gains we saw solidified and locked in.
Yeah, like you said, the data hasn't mattered a lot lately. We've been getting some good data that the market didn't move on. The PPI especially, there was just nothing. So it feels like inflation data is unimportant, and it's going to be the jobs data that people care about. And like Andrew said, when JOLTS comes in low and then initial jobless claims, is higher, 231,000 versus a 200,000 or 212 estimate. That's not that far away, but being over 200,000 on initial jobless is still considered a fairly high level. So, that's going to put us in a position with that plus jolts equals, okay labor, but not as strong as, a lot of people would like to see. And if labor is not super strong, that's going to help keep inflation in check, and it's going to give us the ability to get a little bit lower on interest rates without sending the market to an ugly spot. So that was last week, but let's talk about the good, which is going to be what we got coming up this week. So because of the shutdown and things getting moved forward, we've got some really big stuff coming out this week. I'll go ahead and highlight the boring stuff and let Andrew get to the fun stuff. Tuesday is going to be the first day that we get any kind of real movement, where we've got retail sales, employment costs, ADP change weekly. ADP was really critical when we didn't have our, typical BLS data. So I feel like the markets still care about that, because that's going to be kind of forecasting what we're going to see on Wednesday. And, the other early week stuff, today we've got speeches from, I believe, 4 members of the Fed are talking today. Could be interesting, with a new Fed chair being nominated by Trump. Are they going to talk about that? Are they going to speak much about what they expect in the future? Or is it going to be a bunch of boring nothing? Who knows? We could actually get something interesting out of today. I know I'm going to be stuck probably with an earbud in, listening to a bunch of interviews of Fed members. And it's just the worst, guys. Thank you for liking and subscribe. Oh wait, we don't collect any revenue from this channel, do we? We got to
none.
Get some tips in here, because listening to those guys talk is about the worst part of this job, but it is important. So we're going to be listening to that. Then Wednesday, we get some fun stuff. Andrew, what we got on Wednesday?
Wednesday is the delayed unemployment rate, jobs data. That's going to be coming out. So the 2 big data movers, or market movers this week for data, will be the unemployment rate and the jobs data that comes out on Wednesday, and then the consumer price index measurement of inflation that comes in on Friday. Those are going to be the 2. And it's interesting to note on the CPI report that there is an expectation of the core consumer price index, stripping out food and energy, from rising from 0.2% to 0.3%. So the market is anticipating that. If that would miss, we could find ourselves in a really good spot. If it would miss to the low side, if it would miss to the high side and be even higher than expectations, we find ourselves in a bad spot pretty quick.
Yeah, and I never like when we see on inflation data, you've got the month over month core, projected to increase from 0.2 to 0.3. Rounding's got a lot to do with that. And, markets do know that, so they take that into consideration some. But the year over year core actually dropping from 2.6 to 2.5. So, we're replacing previous data. So, that math is a little bit reasonable. But, man, headline from 2.7 to 2.5, that's going to make headlines if we come in with inflation at 2.5%. That's a pretty big drop from where we were 6 months ago. And, getting, 20 basis points off, or 0.2% from that, it's going to be hard to be high on a month over month and drop on the year over year settings. So, to me, it's set up for a mixed bag.
Agreed.
But we'll see. I do like that on Wednesday, the projection for non-farm payrolls, from 50,000 previous to 70,000, it does leave some room to miss there, with an employment rate, supposed to stay steady from 4.4% previous to the same now. There's room to miss on that as well. So the room to miss to get things that are looking a little bit better, more favorable for rates is there. It exists on Wednesday. Again, I think Friday could be a mixed bag, but if everything is pointed in the same direction and inconsistent with previous reports, it could absolutely put us in a better spot. Let's get into the Fed. Fed's been a hot topic here. It's going to be kind of boring this year, which I'm not upset with. Boring and, clear on direction is great. We had our last drop. The next one is not projected now, still until June. And if you remember from the last time we talked about this a couple of weeks ago, Andrew, there was a little bit of, wishy-washiness on, are we going to see something in April? And I feel like the closer we get to April, the more consistent this data is, the further it's going to move that April is not in contention, which I think is going to be good for the markets. Uncertainty and not dropping when there may be a drop is never a good thing. And I do like seeing that, 98% in June. Anything else you would take away from this chart?
No, I think it's clearly set up. And as we said, you can read a lot into the second column, that the second cut will be in September. I think it's way too far out to call that. We need to get past cut 1, see the market's reaction to cut one, see where labor data is. I think it's very speculative to say we'll have the second cut in September. It might be there, but it could also very easily be moved out to October or even December if the market's supported.
Yeah, and I think what a lot of people aren't necessarily considering is we just got 3 cuts at the end of 2025. The, resonant energy from those cuts is not really showing up yet. It takes a while when the Fed cuts rates. There's some immediate impact, but not really, not as far as labor market goes, overall inflation. These things take a little bit of time to develop. So while we're saying, yeah, hey, we got 2 cuts here, these are 2 more cuts on top of the 1 cut we've already had this year, the 3 we've had at the end of last year. Like getting into this 300 to 325 target, we're going to get there. But as we get there and as we sit there, and all projections right now are sitting there all the way through 2027, there's still going to be lots of movement in the market. And this is why we always tell people, the Fed funds rate doesn't necessarily indicate where we're going on interest rates. That it's going to get to a spot where it holds and it's fairly steady. And there's still a lot that's going to impact the mortgage market, treasury bonds, mortgage-backed securities. This is just one piece of the puzzle. And as we know, things are coming and impacting this rate. That same information is, dictating where things go on treasuries and MBS, but it's perfectly fine. Just because we're going to be flat at some point for a while doesn't mean rates are going to sit there and stay there. We can still have a gradual settling down after the Fed funds rate gets where it is. Anything else you'd add?
I don't have anything else I would add to that. I think you explained that beautifully.
All right. So I think this is our last slide. I want to hit you. Oh, now mortgage rates. We already hit mortgage rates. Mortgage rates are boring. No, I guess
boring. It's boring. The same thing we're looking at every year. We start to see, or every week. We're starting to see that downturn at the end. That's from the JOLTS report. I think the only thing really interesting to note here is the yield spread between the 10-year and mortgage-backed securities for the first time is below 2% in a very, very long time. And that's, keep in mind that used to be 3%. And if you don't know the yield spread, it's take the 10-year treasury and add the yield spread to it. And that's where rates were. At one point, we were at 3%. When 10-year treasury hit 5%, we were at 8% mortgage rates. That spread between them has shrunk down. Now we're just a tick below 2%, which is really healthy.
Yeah, 2% mark is good. That would indicate stability. That's got a lot of things in that spread, which is actually going to take me to the point I wanted to hit you with today. But, it feels a little inconsistent to be, blasé about rates sitting at, 6.15% today. We would have been begging for this, 6-7 months ago. And now it's like, okay, cool. What next? It's like when I get my kids presents for Christmas and I'm like, hey, that was great. And then, okay, what you got for me? I'm like, man, can y'all just sit in this moment for a bit? Nope. Apparently we can't. Mortgage people are just like 11-year-olds. And, we want more and we want it now. But yeah, that 6.15, holding this 6 to 6.25 should be consistent for a while. It will take a lot to drop down below that 6% and hold there. But everything is pointing to an eventuality. For now, we're going to enjoy the hold. All right, let me get to this thing I just saw, which is the first time Donald Trump has acknowledged the possibility of a reduction in guarantee fees. Did you see this tweet or Truth Social? I don't know what you call it. The social media post that was shared by Trump yesterday.
I did not see it. I was at my daughter's volleyball tournament all day yesterday. So this is you're talking the GSE's G fee. Yep.
So yeah, if you didn't know, G fees or guarantee fees are the most interesting thing that you've probably never heard of. It's the most significant factor in that spread that Andrew was talking about between the 10-year treasury bonds and, average 30-year fixed overnight is these fees that are charged by Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, the guarantee fees. And right now they're at like 0.6%. They're really, really, really high. And it dictates what that spread is going to be because this has to be worked into that. It's just flat out fees and it directly correlates to interest rates. And, a lot of industry insiders have been talking for a while that there's no need for them to be this high. It's great that Fannie and Freddie can invest hundreds of billions of dollars into buying, MBS securities, but like the overrun of cash and the massive profitability by the GSEs is largely tied to these guarantee fees that are completely unnecessary for, their leverage, for their profitability, for their sustainability. We don't have the instability that we once had with a market, rates flying Fed going to zero, and then really ratcheting things up thereafter. Like, we don't need this much, instability protection in these G fees. And so there was an article written and shared on Bloomberg. The article was written at the end of January, but it talks about between buying the 200 billion of MBS and cutting guarantee fees by roughly 25 to 35 bips, that could, help this administration hope to achieve total mortgage rate declines by about another 50 basis points this year. That is true. Those two things working hand in hand could very well improve mortgage rates by, about 50 basis points. You get a direct 1-for-1 on the guarantee fees. That's 25 to 35 bips. That's going to save 25 to 35 bips. The mortgage-backed security purchases, like we had talked about, maybe 0.15, 0.2. The market moved and liked it, but overall, like, you're talking about a $9 trillion marketplace. So it's going to make some impact, nothing too crazy. And, Trump shared this tweet last night at 10 p.m. Market didn't seem to care a whole lot about it, but some mortgage guys I've seen already chirping about it this morning. Like, has Trump really acknowledged that Fannie and Freddie are prepared to, look at the G fees, or is he just sharing this because it's giving him credit for things that he's talked about, like, the MBS repurchasing? What do you think, Andrew? Are G fee reductions coming? Does the president even know what G fees are? Is this on his radar, or is it just shared, after the Super Bowl as a distraction that no one cares about because they're talking about halftime shows?
All right. I'll put it in the category right now as portable mortgages, 50-year mortgages, mortgage-backed security purchasing by Fannie Freddie. It's a lot of talk and not a lot of action. Until we actually see action, I'll put it in that category. I mean, again, I'll say it. We've said it before. I'm very happy that this administration is at least has housing on the forefront of their mind. There's a lot of ideas being thrown out, a lot more than any other administration. But I want to see some action on it. Now, the other side of this whole G fee thing that actually really bothers me is, and it's bothering me that Fannie and Freddie are spending $200 billion to buy mortgage-backed securities when the $200 billion they made is from overcharging mortgages. It'd be like me starving my child, and when the kid finally gets hungry enough, be like, okay. Since I'm such a nice dad, I will give you some of the food that I should have been giving you the whole time. And so like stop the whole, like, I'm going to make so much money and charge, and then give it back to you. No, just lower the damn fees so we don't have to go into this repurchase mode. The whole thing is just crazy to me. It drives me a little nuts. I'm all for lowering G fees. I think it needs to happen, but quit acting like it's such a big favor and such a wonderful thing that you're going to buy mortgage-backed securities when it's just being purchased from the excess of the G fees that drove mortgage rates up in the first place. To me, the whole thing is annoying, and it sits in the bucket of great ideas that are not being executed, in my opinion.
All right. Well, let me counter you with this. 50-year mortgages, a joke. Everyone made fun of. The math doesn't math. Portable mortgages, also same kind of thing. Like, could they potentially work? Would they change everything about the back end on everything and only start with new loans going forward and be completely improbable and impractical? Yep. And does no one understand them and how they would work? Everyone's like, oh, I can take my two. No, your mortgage is already a fixed security instrument. It can't be changed like that. But as soon as Trump mentioned the $200 billion in repurchases, what happened to the markets? We saw an instant improvement of 50, 60, 70 basis points, which turned interest rates lower by about 0.15%, pretty much equal to the amount of improvement that we would see if those purchases actually took place. That was something that, just by talking about it, markets cared about, because the markets were smart enough to know this is real. This could have an actual impact, unlike these other two things. And they're within the control of the administration. Even if they haven't really been going anywhere, they can do something. Do you not think the market should have the same reaction to more discussion about G fees, since that is real, practical, and within the confines and controls of the current administration?
I think the market should be reacting to it, but maybe the markets are burned out even from this 200 basis points. Yeah, we saw rates dip into the high fives, but what happened? There was no action by the administration to actually make the 200 billion purchase happen, and we saw rates creep right back up to 6.2. And yes, other data played factors in that, but it's neither here nor there. Like, I think markets are might fail to react to this because there hasn't been action taken on the last really good idea that the markets actually got excited about.
Yeah.
Like at some point you can get a kid excited that you're going to take them to Starbucks and get their favorite drink for them. But if you're a disappointment dad and you keep letting them down, eventually when you say, hey, let's go get Starbucks, they're like, yeah, right. Like that's actually going to happen. At some point, action needs to happen.
Unpack some of your parenting issues here. That's like the third example on that. I'm like, I know you're a good dad, Andrew. What's going on here?
Oh, my Starbucks budget's too high. I got 3 daughters that just love Starbucks.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, no, to your point, I think you're right. I think there is a little fatigue on, tweets and news and like outrage, and there's all these other distractions and everything else going on. And I think, Trump sharing someone else's article talking about the wonderful things he's doing could be a staffer, could be whoever. Like it could just be someone trying to acknowledge what's up until there's something more concrete in place that makes us feel like these G fees are going to be addressed and dealt with. I don't think we take this with any, real seriousness. The market hasn't. They're not reacting. Overnight trading didn't really care. And in fact, we've shed like 5 basis points today, trading pretty flat. It doesn't matter until it matters. So, if you listen to Andrew Cady, what he's saying is be careful with your Starbucks budget. Don't overpromise. Always set good expectations. And we're going to have to just sit back and see what do, the Fed members say this week, what happens with all the labor and employment data on Wednesday. Do we get an interesting turnaround on Friday with inflation? It's a huge week for data. There's a lot going on right now. There's a lot of room for improvement, a lot of room, honestly, to go the opposite direction. So Andrew Cady is putting on a lock alert. If you like it, lock it. That's not a surprise. That's pretty much how we always are here. And there's a lot to look forward to next week. So let's get back together Monday morning next week, talk about what happened, digest that, and see if we start a new trend or if we're going to keep just, swimming over here in the open sea.
All right. Take care. Appreciate you guys.
Appreciate it, man. Take care.